Okay, so today we're diving deep into something a little different, but super important and honestly kind of fascinating when you look at the stories out there. We've got Tina Ginn's book, Dead Funny, a family estate planning guide for the living, which is like a hilarious but actually really helpful guide to this whole estate planning thing. And we've also got some seriously wild stories about celebrity estate disasters. Like seriously, some of this stuff is crazy.
Yeah, it's like a kind of a weird mix at first glance, right? You've got Jin making this potentially like heavy and kind of boring topic actually fun to read about, and then you've got these big celebrity cases like Prince. It all went so wrong because of no planning, and it just kind of shows you like this isn't just for rich people, it's for everybody.
Totally. What really struck me about Jen's book is how she's able to make estate planning funny. I mean, it's not something most people want to think about, let alone laugh about, right? But then you look at someone like Prince, like this mega talented artist who controlled his entire career, and then bam, he dies without a will. It's just total chaos. So, okay, let's break down this Prince thing first, because it's like a master class in what not to do.
Yeah, it really is. Prince died in 2016, and here's the kicker. No will. Intestate, they call it. And when that happens, the state laws where he lived, in this case Minnesota, they decide how everything gets split up.
And we're talking about a huge amount of money, right? Like originally they thought it was around $200 million, and even after the IRS got involved and take their cut, it was still valued at something like $156.4 million.
Right.
And Prince's family situation was a bit well complicated. He didn't have a spouse or any living children, but he did have 6 siblings.
Yep, 1 full sister and 5 half-siblings. And according to Minnesota law, all 6 of them were considered equal heirs to this massive fortune. And so what happened? A legal battle that dragged on for over 6 years. Can you imagine? 6 years of lawyers and court dates and fighting just because there's no clear plan in place.
It's crazy, and I can only imagine the legal fees involved in all of that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just about the money, was it? Prince was such a creative force. He left behind this legendary vault of unreleased music, which some people think could be worth even more than his actual estate. And from what I've read, the siblings had very different ideas about what to do with all that music.
Absolutely. I mean, who gets to decide what gets released,
Yeah.
when, how? Those are big questions, even when there is a clear plan, but without one, forget about it. And to make things even more complicated, while all of this was going on, 2 of Prince's siblings passed away. So then their shares had to go to their heirs, which just brought more people into the mix and made things even messier.
And then, of course, you can't forget about taxes. The IRS came knocking, and they weren't too happy with the initial valuation of the estate. They said it was way too low, like by something like $80 million. So now you've got the heirs fighting amongst themselves and also battling the federal government.
It was a mess. A settlement wasn't reached until May 2021, a full 5 years after Prince died. The estate ended up being valued at that $156.4 million, and it was split between the remaining heirs and a music publishing company called Primary Wave. They got control of a big chunk of Prince's music catalog, too.
So that's it, right? Everything's settled, money split, music managed, case closed.
Well, not quite. Even as recently as 2024, there was more legal action this time involving some of Prince's old business partners.
Oh, wow. So even after everything was supposedly settled, there were still problems.
Exactly. They were fighting over the management of this company that was set up to handle parts of Prince's estate, Prince Legacy LLC. Basically, these former business partners were saying that some of Prince's family members were trying to push them out, and they claimed that would be bad for his legacy. It just goes to show that even years later, not having a plan in the beginning can cause all sorts of problems.
It's kind of tragic when you think about it. This guy was so careful and deliberate with his music, his art, but he didn't do this one basic thing to protect his legacy and his family from this huge legal mess.
It really makes you think. 6 years of battling it out in court, millions spent on legal fees, and nearly $100 million lost to taxes. This is exactly the kind of nightmare scenario that Tina Ginn talks about in Dead Funny. Of course, most people's estates aren't going to be worth as much as Prince's, but the principle's the same.
It's a good point. So the big question is why? Why would someone like Prince, so successful, so seemingly on top of things, why would he neglect something as important as estate planning? I mean, what's the deal?
Well, Tina Ginn actually talks about this in her book. She says sometimes it's a feeling of invincibility, especially when you're younger. You think you have all the time in the world. And for super busy people, like Prince, administrative stuff like estate planning can easily get pushed aside. And then there's just plain old procrastination. Nobody wants to think about their own death, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's easy to think of this as a celebrity problem, something that doesn't apply to everyday folks.
Yeah.
But you're right, those reasons for not planning, being too busy, putting it off, those are things everyone struggles with. It doesn't matter how much money you have.
Exactly. The Prince case is definitely extreme, but it's a really good example of what can happen if you don't have an estate plan in place. And that's why a book like Dead Funny is so important for everyone to read.
Right. Dead Funny, a family estate planning guide for the living. I love that title, by the way. It tells you right away that this isn't going to be some boring legal textbook. Tina Ginn's whole approach is about making estate planning approachable, even funny, so that people will actually do it.
And what's so great about Dead Funny is that it explains in plain English why estate planning matters for you, the listener. It's not just about deciding where your money goes when you die. It's about making sure your wishes are followed in all sorts of areas.
Absolutely. And I think Prince's story really highlights this. If you don't have a will, you basically lose control. The state decides how your assets are divided, and that might not be what you want at all. You work hard for your money, shouldn't you get to say where it goes?
You should. And besides the money, a good estate plan, like Tina Ginn talks about, can prevent those horrible family fights that we saw with Prince's siblings. It can also help you save a lot of money on taxes and legal fees, which, as we've seen, can eat up a huge chunk of an estate.
And for a lot of people, the biggest reason for doing estate planning isn't even about money. It's about their kids. Being able to legally name guardians for your kids in case something happens to you is so important. It gives parents peace of mind knowing that their kids will be taken care of.
And it goes beyond just finances and children, too. You can use your estate plan to specify what you want for your funeral so your family doesn't have to make those tough decisions while they're grieving. And Tina Ginn also talks about planning for your digital assets, which is super important these days. We're talking about your online account, social media, even cryptocurrency. All that stuff needs to be accounted for.
It's such a good point. We live so much of our lives online now that our digital footprint is really valuable both sentimentally and sometimes financially. Not planning for that seems like a big mistake.
It is. And if you're someone who cares about charitable giving, your estate plan is how you make sure those donations happen. At the end of the day, having a solid estate plan gives you peace of mind, and it makes things easier for your loved ones. That's what Dead Funny really emphasizes.
The blog post you sent me had this great analogy about dying without an estate plan. It said, it's like handing your family a grenade with the pin pulled. That's a pretty vivid way to describe the potential for chaos and damage, isn't it?
Yeah, it really drives the point home. The article also made a really good point about intestacy laws. Those are the laws that kick in when you die without a will. They're meant to be a safety net, not a replacement for a real estate plan.
Right. So to avoid those grenade situations, both Dead Funny and the blog post recommend some pretty simple steps.
Yeah.
Get a will, figure out if a trust makes sense for you, make sure you've named beneficiaries on your financial accounts, plan for estate taxes, and most importantly, keep your plan updated as your life changes. And don't forget to talk to your family about your wishes.
Exactly. Being open and honest with your family can prevent so many headaches and arguments down the road. Now, Prince isn't the only celebrity who's had estate troubles. There are tons of stories out there, and they're not just sad, they're actually kind of funny in a dark way.
Yeah, that blog post had a whole list of celebrity estate disasters. Like Aretha Franklin, they found several handwritten wills after she died, including one under her couch cushions. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
It sounds like something straight out of Dead Funny, but of course it's not so funny for the families involved. And then there's James Brown. His estate was tied up in court for 15 years with all these questions about different wills and people claiming to be heirs. It was a mess.
And it's not just musicians either. The art world had its share of estate drama too. Pablo Picasso's heirs spent millions just fighting over his art collection for years.
And sometimes, even when there is a will, things can still go wrong. Whitney Houston left her entire estate to her daughter, Bobby Christina, but without certain protections in place, the inheritance ended up facing even more legal trouble after Bobby Christina died.
It's like a never-ending saga. And then there's Jimi Hendrix. His estate was stuck in legal battles for 30 years, and his own brother ended up getting cut out. Marlon Brando had a ton of lawsuits from people claiming he'd made them verbal promises that were never written down. It shows you that money and fame don't protect you from estate planning mistakes.
Oh, and then you've got the really weird ones. The hilarious estate planning fails that Tina Ginn would probably appreciate. Leona Helmsley leaving millions to her dog while disinheriting her grandchildren, people writing their wills on crazy things, families fighting over stuff like a cowboy hat, and then there are the wills with super specific and sometimes just plain strange clauses that try to control what their beneficiaries do.
The no redheads clause always gets me.
Yeah.
And the story about the person who accidentally left everything to their ex because they forgot to update their will. Oh, and how about the billionaire who left her entire fortune to 150 stray cats? These stories are definitely out there, but they highlight the fact that without a clear, legally sound plan, you can end up with some really unexpected and unwanted results.
They do make you think twice about getting your affairs in order, which brings us to the real cost of not planning. The blog post laid out 6 big problems that we've seen play out in these celebrity estate cases.
Let's go through them one more time just to make sure everyone's got it. Number one, the IRS can take a big chunk of your money. Prince's estate lost almost $100 million in taxes. Number two, not having a plan can cause huge family fights. Money and inheritance can bring out the worst in people.
Number 3, if you don't have a will, the government gets to decide who gets what based on state law, and that might not be what you want at all. Number 4, the whole process can take forever, like in Prince's case, it's been going on for 6 years, and there are still issues popping up.
Number five, your actual wishes about your money and your legacy might not be followed. Your stuff could end up going to people you never intended to give it to. And number six, the legal fees for sorting out a messy estate can be insane. Lawyers could end up being the ones who benefit the most. That blog post was right when it said that spending a little bit of money on estate planning now can save you a ton of money and headaches later on.
So after this deep dive into dead funny and all these celebrity estate stories, what's the big takeaway for you, the listener?
Estate planning isn't just for the super rich, it's for everyone. Prince's story and all the advice in Dead Funny show how much chaos and heartache can happen when you don't plan.
You might not have millions of dollars or a vault full of unreleased music, but you do have a legacy, and you have people you love, and you have wishes for how your assets should be handled, no matter how big or small they are. Even making sure a special family heirloom goes to the right person takes planning.
That's so true. And thinking about estate planning might not be the most fun thing in the world, but it's a way to take care of your loved ones and make things easier for them when you're gone. Tina Ginn makes it a lot less scary and a lot more fun to think about in Dead Funny.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something for you to think about. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? Have you done what you need to do to make sure your wishes are followed and to protect your loved ones from unnecessary stress and fighting? Even just starting a conversation with your family or checking out Dead Funny could be the most important thing you do this week.